What do you think of when you hear the word persecution? Is it criticism? Is it an unkind response to a social media post? Is it a shunning for a family member or the loss of a friendship? Those are difficult things, hard things, but they're not what millions of Christians, followers of Jesus, would consider persecution. In fact, Jesus himself said those willing to follow him should be prepared to give up everything, houses, wealth, reputation, family, even life itself as martyrs to follow him. Tonight on State of Independence, a special update on the persecuted church around the world with the organization that has been speaking for them since 1967. Tonight's topic is important, and I hope you'll stay with us. You and I can't really imagine it. Holding church services in secret, windows covered, songs muffled, reading from fragments of the Bible. We can't imagine seeing our church bulldozed by the police or being forced to deny our faith in writing. And the idea of being beaten, shot, or tortured feels like a movie, not real life. But here's what Richard Wurmbrand, founder of the Voice of the Martyrs, an organization that speaks for persecuted Christians around the world, once wrote. Persecution has always produced a better Christian, a witnessing Christian, a soul-winning Christian. Communist persecution has backfired and produced serious, dedicated Christians, such as are rarely seen in free lands. These people cannot understand how anyone can be a Christian and not want to win every soul they meet. Does that sound crazy? Persecution produces better Christians? Well, after World War II, Pastor Wurmbrand was imprisoned and tortured by the communist regime of Romania, a brutal 14-year sentence that God still continues to use to help suffering Christians around the world stay faithful under persecution. Well, many of you will likely recognize Todd Nettleton's voice, even if you've never seen his face, although he's been on this program before. Among other titles, he's the host of The Voice of the Martyrs Radio, and we're grateful he's here with us. Todd, welcome back to State of Independence.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, I'm really taken in by the challenges that Christian people face. All of us who self-identify as Christian, these are people who go to church and who attend Bible study, like me, and people who lead churches. Many of us have been criticized at some point, especially if we're outspoken about our faith. We've maybe been criticized before. Maybe people have branded us, for our faith. Maybe even a few folks watching have lost a friend or two, or people have kind of avoided them because of their Christian faith. But none of us really knows what it's like to be persecuted for it. I mean, the thought of a bulldozer bulldozing down the church we've attended for X number of years, or the thought of somebody coming in and forcing us and saying, you lose your job unless you write down that you do not follow Jesus Christ. I mean, these are things that are foreign to us and are scary. Or losing your wealth. What if the state took away your home and confiscated your bank account and left you homeless on the street? These are unthinkable things, certainly in these great United States of America. But these are the kinds of things I think that people who have been persecuted undergo. Is that right?
They do undergo. And it's interesting, hearing your introduction reminded me of a story. We think those things are unthinkable because we can't imagine them. For a lot of our persecuted brothers and sisters who live with that all the time, it's something they hardly notice. I was reminded of a story. One of my coworkers was in India meeting with a group of pastors, and he had been told, these are our persecuted pastors. You're going to come in, you're going to meet some of them, you're going to hear some of their stories. And so as he was kind of introduced, he just wanted to get to know. There was about 30 pastors gathered together, and he said, well, how many of you have been persecuted for your faith in Christ? And not a single pastor raised their hand. And he was like, kind of looking at his host and saying, wait a minute, I thought you were bringing me persecuted pastors. And the host was like, well, maybe be more specific. And he said, well, how many of you have been beaten because of leading your church, because of serving Christ? And most of the hands in the room went up. And he was like, wait a minute. When I asked if they'd been persecuted, nobody raised their hand. But when I asked if they'd been beaten, now almost every hand is up. What's going on? And it was explained to him that they just think that's part of following Jesus. That's what happens when you follow Jesus. They don't really think of that as some strange thing that happened. They think of it as, well, yeah, I followed Jesus and I got beaten up. Of course, that's what happens when you follow Jesus. So the mindset is very different in the 70 plus nations where Christians are persecuted than what it is here for us who have lived and enjoyed our freedoms for so long.
Yeah, so persecution is a little bit different from criticism. Somebody
a little bit
criticizing you or whatever, making you mildly uncomfortable. It's a whole different world. Imagine that. So most of these people said they'd been beaten, and I'm sure some of them have probably been jailed. This is unthinkable stuff. Tell me, what are the last time you were on, we talked about China, I believe, and some of the challenges that Christian people face in China. Although there was hope there, which is wonderful. Tell me about some of the persecution hotspots around the world, because obviously there are. Richard Wurmbrand was imprisoned in Romania. Are there still places in Europe, in the Middle East, that are particularly hard for Christians where they might be persecuted?
Certainly the Middle East, especially in an Islamic context, there is almost always persecution in an Islamic context, especially for those who would leave Islam. If you were born in a Muslim family, in the eyes of your family members, in the eyes usually of your government, you're a Muslim. And so for you to say, no, I'm not a Muslim, I'm a Christian, well, that makes you an apostate. And in those contexts, it's interesting because often, and in fact, I would say usually, the first line of persecution is not the government, it's not the police, it's not anybody in authority. It's your dad, it's your big brother, it's somebody in your family who's coming to you and saying, listen, we are a Muslim family. If you're not a Muslim, you don't have a place in this family anymore. And usually in those cultures, your family and your extended family is the pathway to a job, it's the pathway to education, it's the pathway to all of the good things that we want in life. And so to be cut off from your family is not just a matter of, hey, my relatives don't talk to me anymore. It's like you don't have a future anymore. You don't have potential. All those opportunities are cut off to you. So that's usually the first line of persecution. And then maybe later down the road, the government or the police gets involved. But in some ways, I think that family persecution is almost more difficult. The people who are supposed to love you are the people who are persecuting you. So that's usually the first line in the Middle East and often in an Islamic context, even in other parts of the world as well.
Like Africa, does Africa have that same challenge? Are there countries there?
Africa is something, in fact, we just released our global prayer guide for this new year, 2023, and there are 4 new countries in the global prayer guide this year. All 4 of them are on the African continent, and really what that represents is the rise of radical Islam in Africa. And we see it moving further and further south to places like Mozambique, places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Those are 2 of the new countries in our prayer guide. And what that means is persecution now is not sort of a weird anomaly that happens once in a while. It is a part of following Christ in those countries. And I think particularly of northern Mozambique, there is a group there that has pledged allegiance to ISIS. We have heard multiple stories. They will go into a village, they will gather all the people in the village, and they will start asking one by one, are you a Christian or are you a Muslim? The Muslims are allowed to live, the Christians are executed, and often it's by being beheaded.
Oh, Lord.
And that has happened in village after village, and thousands of Christians have fled. They fled into displaced person camps, they fled into the bush. But like I say, it's not an anomaly anymore in Mozambique. It is part of following Christ, especially in the northern part of that country.
Yeah. Is there a difference between what government policy is and, because in a lot of countries they may have strict policies that say what is and isn't allowed, and then what they actually allow? For instance, we were talking about China last time, and there seems to be a window for Christians to be able to, within certain guidelines, practice their faith without running afoul of the law, even though government policy would seem to prohibit it. Tell me, is that the case in other places? Does government policy actually differ from what they actually allow?
there are places where that is true, where there is maybe more leeway in practice than there is in the law itself. But even in those places, and often you mentioned China, there's other communist countries in Southeast Asia. The issue for the communist government is control. We want to control you. We want to control your hearts and minds. We want you to wake up every morning and think, how can I be a good communist today? If you're a follower of Christ and you wake up every morning and think, how can I honor Jesus today? That's not what the Communist Party wants. And so even actually just yesterday, I heard a story of three men in a Southeast Asian communist country. I'd rather not say the specific location, but they became Christians in their village. They were the first Christians in the village. And they tried to register a church, which is what the law would say. If you want to have religious gatherings, you need to register that with the government. We want to know where those gatherings are happening. We want to know who's there. So they tried to follow the law. Instead, they were sent to prison. They have been sentenced apparently to 18 months in prison for following the law, for trying to establish a church in their village where there was no church previously. So, often we will hear from these governments this idea that, well, if the church would just cooperate, if the church would just register, if the Christians would just follow the law, there wouldn't be any persecution. It's not really about their Christian faith. It's about following the law. But then in the case of these brothers, and we've seen this in other places as well, they tried to follow the law, and now they're in prison. And what it comes down to is they wanted to have a church in a village where there had never been a church before.
My goodness. Give me a sense of the numbers of people who are at risk here. Obviously, some people might say, well, if there are only, a few people, especially Americans, because in the United States we have people who train to become missionaries. We've had people on State of Independence who said they finished college and they went into the ministry as a missionary, and they went to a foreign country to serve and to share the good news of the gospel with people there. So what number of what are some of the numbers of American people who are in these countries where there's active persecution? Is it a big number? Although even if it's one, that's one too many. I mean, we can't say, oh well, it's only 5, because all 5 of those lives are precious, and what they do is so important. But give me a sense of the numbers, if you can, of around the world. Is there any way to do that?
I don't know specific numbers, especially of Americans. I know there are 70 countries where Christians are persecuted on a regular basis. And one of the things that is true, and you mentioned about stronger Christians who want to be soul winners, in almost every one of those 70 countries, the church is growing. People are coming to faith. People are coming to know Jesus. And so, that's great news from a Christian perspective of, yes, we want to see the gospel spread. But when it comes to persecution, that also means there are more targets. There are more people who could be persecuted for following Jesus because there's more people following Jesus. And so it is certainly something that we want to pray for. And I think, you mentioned Americans who are doing this, and I have met many of those who are saying, you know what? God's calling us to go, so we're going to go. We don't know what's going to happen to our safety. We understand there are risks involved in this, but God has called us. We're going to answer that call. And, I honor their courage. I also think of brothers and sisters from that country who they don't have a U.S. passport to maybe get them out of jail. They know, I live here. I'm going to be here. I'm going to die here. And so in many cases, the risk to them is even greater than to gospel workers who would come in from outside.
Well, God bless the men and women who knowingly go to a country where there's persecution. What a huge challenge. I can't even begin to imagine what that must be like. Even having courage and saying, you know what, I'm willing to do this. This is where the Lord is sending me. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is where I'm supposed to be. Being beaten and jailed or maybe killed. I mean, in the countries where they will behead you if you say you follow Jesus Christ, where you literally have to. The moment you say you follow Jesus Christ, you're in risk of being beheaded. That's just so scary, and what courage it takes. I can imagine that if you have put your life on the line, for most of us, the price of following Jesus isn't very steep. It's the free gift of God, lest any man or woman should boast, for that matter. But at the same time, here in the United States, in this great free country of ours, where many people, millions of people self-identify as Christians, it doesn't cost anything of us. As a matter of fact, it might even help you, in a job application if you say you're a member of XYZ local church. For a lot of people, that's a win for them. But as I was saying early on in the show, the people who had to undergo this persecution are incredibly strong, and their faith is such that they feel like they've got to let everybody know about Jesus, who he is and what he's done in their lives, and they want to win every soul they can for Christ. That's not most of us, sadly, Todd, in the U.S. I mean, even among the churchgoers, we consider we're doing a good job if we go to church and maybe go to Bible study, if we can recite some verses. Maybe we can say over the last decade we witnessed once to somebody. We feel like, not bad. That's not bad. I witnessed to somebody once. There was a person once who came to Christ because of me. And here these people are, they put their life on the line, they risk beheading or going to jail or just being beaten to a pulp. And they don't even complain like those pastors that you talked about. They don't even call it persecution. They expect it to happen. And also their faith is strong. I wish we could be that strong here in this country. I wish we had that here. I'm so grateful that you're sharing this with people. Does the White House or any governmental agencies ever ask you for information on the persecution or seek your guidance on how they might intervene or help or protect American citizens who are at risk?
We have over the years had usually individual Congress people or people in government who will reach out and say, hey, do you know anything about what's happening in this country, what we can do here? We really our focus is on serving persecuted Christians. And so we don't spend a lot of time and effort to advocate to try to get the U.S. government to do things on behalf of them. We make our magazine, we make our prayer guide, we make our resources available for free to every U.S. citizen, including those who work for the government. So they can sign up and they can access the information that Voice of the Martyrs has. But one of the things that we try to encourage people to understand is, yes, there is a role for government in this. And certainly we want our government to speak out on behalf of religious freedom. We want them to speak out on behalf of those who are being oppressed. But we also want to understand the spiritual dimension of this, that what is happening is exactly what Jesus said would happen. He said, the world hates me. If you follow me, the world is going to hate you too. If he had some marketing consultants, they would have told him, Jesus, that is not a good message. That's terrible. Nobody's going to follow you. But in fact, that's what he said would happen. And so we try to encourage our brothers and sisters when they are going through that you are experiencing the truth of what Jesus promised. But he also said, do not fear. I have overcome the world. I've overcome this situation. I've overcome this government or this oppression that you're facing. And so we try to encourage them with that message and remind them one of the lies of Satan in the midst of persecution is you're the only one this is happening to, and everybody has forgotten you. You're all by yourself in this prison cell. You're all by yourself in this situation. We try to remind our brothers and sisters regularly, you're not all by yourself. There are thousands of Christians in the U.S. who are praying for you, who are standing with you. And so we try to really focus on that spiritual realm and the spiritual issue more than sort of government policy and how different governments could respond.
Wonderful. This is wonderful to hear. What great advice. What a wonderful way to encourage people who are being persecuted, to let them know they're not alone. When we return, I want Todd to answer this question. Are Christians in America healthy enough for persecution? Would we stand, fall, or fold under pressure? Don't go away.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
Todd Nettleton is with the Voice of the Martyrs, an organization that helps us in the Western world understand the plight of persecuted brothers and sisters around the globe. Todd, here's a question. Are we ready, those of us who are here in the United States, are we ready for the kind of persecution that you've been describing? I mean, could we stand? Do you think that church folks, churchgoers, people who self-identify as Christian, do you think that we could handle it?
Here's the good news. Let me give you some good news in that question. And it's not really from me, it's from a lady named Hannalee Gronwald. Hannalee, her family, her husband and her 2 teenage children were killed in Afghanistan. They had gone there to minister. And I had the chance to interview Hannalee. In fact, we broadcast the interview on Voice of the Martyrs radio. And she said if you had asked her a month before her husband was killed, her children were killed, Hannalee, do you have enough faith? Do you have enough grace to go through losing your family? She would have said, no way, there's not a chance I could go through that and still hang on to my faith. The way she described it is she compared it to a boarding pass. God's grace to go through that situation and to hang on to her faith was like a boarding pass. And you don't get your boarding pass a year before you get on the plane. You get it when you go to the airport, right before. And she said, even in the hours before the attack that killed her family, God somehow imbued his grace into her and gave her the strength and gave her the courage and the fortitude to go through that situation and graciously love the Afghan people. Even as her husband and her 2 teenagers had been killed, she said, I love the Afghan people. I forgive the people who killed my family. And so that's the thing that encourages me, because if you ask me, are you ready to go through a situation like that? I would say no, there's no chance that I have strong enough faith to go through that. But I trust that if that's the plane that God wants me to get on, that at the right time, he'll give me the boarding pass. He'll give me his grace to be able to go through that situation. And the testimony of Hannalee, the testimony of so many other brothers and sisters tells me that I can trust him to do that at that time.
The God we serve is amazing, Todd. He's able to do all things, and he gives us what we need when we need it. You're absolutely right. Of course, I'm awfully brave right here, sitting behind the protection of this camera and in this nice studio, and I would lead the charge, for Christians around the world who are persecuted, and yet and still, if it happened to me, if I found myself in one of those countries, I don't know where I would find the strength to be able to stand up and to proclaim my faith and to be prepared to die for my faith, and then also be prepared to forgive the people who are doing this to me. And Hannalee's story is such an encouragement to every Christian person, every person watching this show, because God gives us what we need in the moments when we need it, and his grace is sufficient, isn't it?
It is. And, I would encourage people, there's 2 ways I think we get ready to go through persecution and withstand it. One is studying the scriptures. Obviously, we want to hide God's word in our heart. We want to have deep roots into the Bible. The other thing I think is the stories of our brothers and sisters who already have gone through persecution. People like Hannalee, as we read their stories, as we see their stories, that challenges us and it encourages us and it prepares us. So that's part of the reason Voice of the Martyrs makes so many resources available, is to help American Christians know, help them pray, but also help them prepare.
What's the website if people wanted to support you?
Persecution.com. It's an easy one to remember, persecution.com. We also just created a brand new app for your smartphone. You can search for Voice of the Martyrs or search for VOM app in your app store, but persecution.com is the main website. Well,
Todd, it was great to have you back on State of Independence. Thanks for your mission at the Voice of the Martyrs. We're so glad you're there.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back with closing thoughts from our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Well, we wanted Todd to come back here because Americans really, we have a difficult time recognizing, I think, persecution.
Oh yeah, we're pretty comfortable here.
We are, and we have religious freedom squabbles, and most of those involve our ability to speak out in the public square, or to perhaps have public schools reflect values of minority groups like Christians. But we don't think about the option not being available. The Christian school closing and then getting bulldozed. The church having the doors padlocked, not being able to share your faith. There are limits in the military, or there are limits in government and public, which are uncomfortable, and there's friction, and there are people speaking out for that. But when we think of the persecuted church, the inability to follow Jesus.
Yeah. Some people would say, well, the not being able to share your faith, that's not a problem. I don't do that anyway. So they didn't let me do it. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
But we are so comfortable, Jeff. I mean, we live in, this is, you and I have both traveled a bit around the world, and you come here, and life is good.
Yeah.
I mean, so you go to church on Sunday, maybe you have a good dialogue, maybe a good debate with somebody who's not a Christian, maybe it gets a little bit heated.
You can pick your level of involvement.
Exactly.
You can pick your temperature. Do you want light Christianity, medium, or bold?
Bold, right.
And the bold option is really, those are for sports stars, or those are for celebrities that kind of step out and for maybe 30 seconds say something that is controversial by the general public standards. But we're not, when we're talking about what's happening in places like China or all through the Middle East, in places in South America and Africa, 70 countries was the number. So that's millions of people.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, at every point Todd was talking, and you asked them a question about whether the government gets involved in some of these issues, he said, we're not really looking to the government. We're looking for Christians to recognize persecution when it comes. I think it's almost the passport stamp.
Yeah.
It's almost the validator, that when you feel like persecution is coming, you kind of, there's confirmation that you're on the path.
Yeah.
So what do we do when we don't feel any pushback? I think that should be a warning light to us, our check engine light.
Yeah. I mean, we're so comfortable. You have an argument with somebody about Christ, and you go to your favorite restaurant, and you have a meal, and you forget about it.
Yeah.
But your life is not required of you. You don't have to worry that your head's going to get cut off.
Right.
There's
a little internal dialogue that goes, if this little act of faith, publicly praying, or letting a coworker know that I was at a religious service, I was at church on Sunday, or taking the dialogue in a direction towards faith, if that causes friction, we often step back. I think the message today was step forward.
Yeah, amen. Well, to be faithful unto death is always something we hope would be the path we choose if our moment of persecution comes. Jesus promises you and me that wherever he leads, if our hope is in him, we're not alone. I hope my conversation with Todd helps you see that millions of Christians around the world are claiming that promise. If they can trust in him, so can you. Drop me a note at the comment box at joewatkins.org. Tell me how this conversation with Todd helped you. From our studios here in Philadelphia, America's first capital, I'm Joe Watkins. For Jeff Coleman and our team at State of Independence, thanks for sharing your time with us. God willing, we'll see you next week. That's an assignment to go to a persecuted country, an assignment that I hope God doesn't have in store for me. I love the Lord, I follow him, but man.
Well, technology travels. So.
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.